of AMC and RMC folks working at the South Pole. And we have two characters in the front row. And I was retired with nothing to do, and all of a sudden the light went on. I said, you might as well go to Antarctica. So I applied, and I was hired as a maintenance technician at the pole. I'll fill in a few blanks about how the program works. The logo on the right is the U.S. Antarctic program, and they are, the program is run by the National Science Foundation. And I worked for a subcontractor at the pole providing services, and the Antarctic support contract supplies most of the manpower to operate the Antarctic stations. And as we kept reminding ourselves, we were there supporting science, but it was a whole lot more than that. So a little bit about the program. It's managed by the National Science Foundation. As you can see, 100+ projects per year. 3,000 people come and go from the United States. Scientists, support people, you name it. There are 3 stations on Antarctica, 2 ships in the ocean supporting the whole operation, and many, many field camps. A little bit of a flow chart here so you know the cast of characters. I fit in under Leidos. I was a subcontractor to Leidos, the Pacific Architects and Engineers with my, oh, very good, your eyes are better than mine, thank you. And what really goes on at the South Pole, you have the support staff and you have the scientific operation. There are about 150 people at the pole during the summer. Of those, 100 are support and 50 are scientists. And the term grantee is also a term for the scientists. That's where all the scientific work comes in. And everything else is in support of science. Looking over at the other agencies, the interesting one to note is CREL. They're located in Hanover, New Hampshire. That's the U.S. Army Cold Regions Engineering and Research Laboratory, and they do all of the ice engineering, all of the really cool stuff in keeping the South Pole going. And everything else, you know, it's amazing, you know, Homeland Security, they're the icebreakers on the coast, Department of Defense, those are the airplanes that get us in and out, and so forth. But a lot of people are involved at the pole, in Antarctica in general. So there's the continent. The 3 circles, red circles, are the U.S. program stations. Palmer Station on the Antarctic Peninsula, Amundsen Scott, the South Pole Station at the South Pole, of course, and then McMurdo Station on the coast. And McMurdo is the primary logistics operation for the Antarctic effort. And these are the other countries that are involved and have stations in Antarctica. Of note is the Vostok station. You know, I have one of those little pointer things. Feel free to ask questions at any point.
Ukraine, do you see that? Here we are. Ukraine. How big is that in relation to, say, the United States?
Another slide is coming.
Okay.
Hang tight. This is the Russian station, Vostok. Out in the middle of nowhere. You can see a number. Norway, the French have an operation. The U.S. cooperates with New Zealand, which is Scott Base, and the Italian station. They do a lot of logistics, flying people back and forth, and all of that. But it's a huge place. And to follow up on your question, there we are.
Oh my gosh.
Holy smokes, is right. The red dots are the 3 U.S. stations. They're South America, of course. So this is amazing. 90% of the water is in the world is frozen in Antarctica.
Wow.
Or fresh water and then the ice. So people are a little concerned about global warming and all of that stuff. 1.5 times the size of the U.S. So a few little facts. Antarctica is it's pretty high. At the South Pole, you're close to 9,000 feet in elevation. It's as dry as can be, one of the driest locations in the world. At the Russian station, 128 below. So yeah, it's cold there. That's obviously wintertime. A lot of wind, that's more on the coast, and there are no native people. Interestingly, you know, we're all suffering through our heat wave right at the moment. I brought up the South Pole weather this afternoon, and it's negative 76 degrees. They're running a negative 110 wind chill and 11 knots of wind. So, but of course, we are in summertime mode, and they are in full wintertime mode, being south of the equator.
Do people actually leave for the winter months?
The South Pole Station is manned year-round. Good question. In the wintertime, they run a crew of about 40 people. A keep the lights on and keep the science going kind of crew. The winter season is roughly 9 months, and the summer season, when I was there, is 3 months, November till middle of February. The austral summer is when they do the bulk of their science work and logistical work and all of that.
What's the average temperature in summertime?
Summertime, it probably averages 15 to 20 below. The highest I ever saw it was maybe -2. But the amazing thing is, this points out, the relative humidity is less than 2%. And there's 3 to 4 inches of snow a year. It's as dry as can be. So the cold is a different cold than what we have in our New England winters. It's quite doable. Wow. A little bit of history continued. The Antarctic Treaty, this is a U.S. stamp that was issued in '71. The Antarctic Treaty. It was established in 1959. This was, of course, during the Cold War. So this is pretty darn amazing that the 49 nations got together and all agreed on how to manage Antarctica. And these are the high points. It was quite a piece. It's probably the best piece of international cooperation there is. Yeah, very cool, very cool. Although they say no military action, many of the military agencies provide the support and logistics, and we'll get into that in a minute. A little bit of history. Some of you may already know this. The South Pole was first not discovered, but it was attained by Roald Amundsen, a Norwegian, and this was a heyday of the grand exploration. And Scott and Amundsen, Scott being an Englishman, they literally raced to the pole. And Amundsen got there about a month ahead of time of Scott, much to the chagrin of the Brits. Welcome, welcome. And so, whoop, I hit too many buttons here. Amundsen arrived on December 14th, 1911, and he immediately erected a tent and named it Polheim, Norwegian for home at the pole. Hung around a few days and took all of his sightings and scientific work. And apparently he left a note for Scott that essentially said, we got here first. And we all know, many of us know the story of Scott. His gang starved to death, and they all died on the way back to the coast. Yeah, but this is the most amazing fact to me. Nobody returned to the pole until 1956. Wow. The International Geophysical Year, And the U.S. Navy established the South Pole Station. And this is the plane. K. Sarah Sarah is the name of the plane. 1956, Doris Day, Humphrey Bogart, K. Sarah. There we go. And if you happen to be down in Florida, the plane is in the Naval Aviation Museum. A good shot of the ski equipment. And I believe this is, maybe somebody can correct me, it also is known as a DC-3. Is that true?
Right.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, it looks like one.
Yeah, it looks like one. Pretty cool stuff, and so that, it was really a race to the pole between the Russians and the Cold War and all of that, and the U.S., and we got there, the U.S., and kind of, you know, like, we'll never leave. It was a scientific operation, it was a political operation, yeah. So, okay, what did I do? So, you leave the U.S., you have this ungodly long flight to New Zealand, to Christchurch, and then the company issues you your extreme cold weather gear. We've all seen pictures of the big red parkas and those ungodly Mickey Mouse boots. I turned mine in within a week and got some different boots. So you're issued your gear, you try it on, you make sure everything fits. They provide the basics. And whenever you fly in the planes, you're required to have your, it's known as ECW, extreme cold weather gear with you. So we finally, the weather clears and you get to fly, and you're departing New Zealand and leaving, so it's just like an airplane flight, departure card, passport and all of that. They check you for contraband and all of that. They don't want you bringing bad stuff to Antarctica. And one of the big issues is vegetative matter. All of your gear has to be clean, so they don't want to bring any kind of biological bad stuff to the ice. And there's our ride to the pole. The C-17, the base out of Washington State, deploys to Antarctica and provides the transportation from Christchurch, New Zealand to McMurdo Station. It's definitely first-class accommodations. You never know what you're going to ride with, a helicopter in the background and a couple of snow vehicles. It's about a 4-hour run. Yeah, first class. I think they provided bathroom facilities, and that was about it.
Open the tail.
Exactly. So once you get to McMurdo Station, you spend a day or two there until the weather clears and logistics work out. And then you are flown from McMurdo inland to the pole, about a 3-hour flight on a Hercules LC-130. This is a Vietnam 60s vintage airplane. It is some noisy. You can see the skis. The skis can be retracted and they can land on wheels. But the interesting thing is you see the C-17 is wheel equipped. At McMurdo, they pack the runways to the point where they can take the impact loading of the wheels. While going to the pole, they're all ski equipped because it's a skiway and it's not firm enough to land a wheeled aircraft.
Wow. So Chris, if you go back, is that a jet assist on the back?
Yes, that's a JATO, a jet assist for taking off. It's not used regularly, but when you have an extremely heavy load, it's preferable to get off the ground. So the JATOs, yes. Yeah. The LC-130s are flown by the New York Air National Guard out of Scotia, New York. I mean, it's just an amazing operation with logistics, and just what it takes to get people there and back is amazing. So you arrive in the pole at the end of November, right around Thanksgiving time. You get off the plane, you're all bundled up, and you take a breath of air, and you go, "Dang, it's -30." You're there, and you get inside as quick as possible. They do not turn the planes off. They immediately load them and send the out crew back because it's so darn cold, the planes would not start again. Some other workhorses of the Antarctic, it's all about flying people around to remote camps. It's a Bachelor is a DC-3 with turboprops and skis, and the de Havilland Twin Otter is one of the workhorse planes. And my last summer, I flew in on a DC-3. The National Science Foundation got cheap and was in a fight with the National Guard on how much they were charging for the planes. So these planes come out of Canada from Ken Bourque Airways. They provide all the planes for Antarctica. So here's home for 3.5 months. The elevated station. It's about 10 years old. It's different areas, gymnasiums, galley, bunks, all of that. This is the runway where you land, the skiway, excuse me. You can see a plane taxiing in, and that's the terminal. And the rest is more places to stay outside, food storage, equipment storage, different logistic buildings. Right here is the communications with the outer world. Since the pole the pole cannot see equator orbiting satellites. So we only have internet 3 to 4 hours a day. And that's when everything's working. So it bounces from here to a station in New Zealand and then a connection to the United States. Limited communications, and what's the other one? The satellite phones exist for emergencies.
Down at the bottom, is that the pole itself?
We'll get there, yes.
Okay.
Right here, good, thank you for asking. That is the ceremonial pole where you come and take all your pictures. And right there is the actual South Pole.
Wow.
And there's some really cool stuff that I'll get into, but the pole moves.
Oh.
So of course I have to send a picture home to my mother. You know, here I am at the South Pole and all of that. So ceremonial pole and all the fancy equipment that the company lends you for your duration. The flags all represent countries that are signatories to the Antarctic Treaty. And there's home, the main entrance. When they refer to it as the elevated station, the architects felt that they could design it so that the snow would blow underneath the station and not drift up. Well, guess what? That didn't work too well, but they try. One of the biggest expenses is moving snow all the time. Although there's only 3 inches a year, it never melts, so it always blows around. And the station is designed so that these columns can be jacked up, and when there's too much snow, they can raise the station out of the snow. Pretty cool engineering. Number of people in Gorham spent 4 or 5 summers working on the pole, building it, and I could give you a whole slide presentation on the building of this station. There's my room. Very commodious. I'm not much of a housekeeper. The key thing is the clothesline. You're allowed 2 showers a week, 1 load of laundry a week, and it is so darn dry there. You do your laundry, hang it on the clothesline, and boom, within a half hour it's bone dry.
Wow.
I mean, the biggest problem I had was being at 9,000 feet is the elevation of the pole. And it took me well over a week to get my oxygen levels up and so forth. And the key thing is a telephone. I called Mom once a week on the phone. I mean, direct satellite link to Denver, Colorado, and you just pay for a local call. A little bit of a time difference. The pole operates on New Zealand time, so everybody is on the same page. Oh, and you notice the cardboard in the window, 24-hour sunlight. Only way I could sleep was with the window being boxed up.
When was the building built?
Oh, golly. 10 years ago? Is that about right, Randy?
wow.
It's been there for 10 years, it took 10 years to build, so it started 20 years ago.
So it started 20 years ago. And the amazing fact about the building is every bit of the building material had to come in a LC-130 transport.
Oh my gosh.
All of the steel beams, you name it, it has to be designed and fit into an airplane. I mean, can you imagine what it took to get that there? So my job, I was known as a UT, and that's a Navy term for a utility technician, aka known as a maintenance specialist. And this is my first summer. Jack's worked for the program for 20 years. When he's not there, he's in Palmyra on the equator working for the Nature Foundation, running a camp. So he goes from +100 to negative, you know. Plumber, Eric is a retired auto worker from Detroit, and another Eric who's worked for the program for 10 years. He was the foreman, so real wonderful bunch of people to work with. Here I am heading out to work. You can see my boots have been changed. I have the much warmer boots. These are examples of the James Way hut from the Korean War era. This happens to be the carpenter shop. And one of our jobs as the maintenance technicians were to visit every structure at the pole to check on mechanical systems, heating systems, ventilation, and all of that. So yeah, I would do 5 to 8 miles a day walking around the pole, so it was just wonderful. Paid to walk around the South Pole.
What's with the skimpy little jacket that you've got on instead of that great big?
Well, you know, those big red jackets were too damn hot. This is probably -10, and the sun is shining all the time, so you're warm. And I had long underwear on, and this is some Carhartt insulated bibs, and yeah, it seems skippy, you're right, but it worked. And plus, you're always within 20 minutes of a heated building. So it wasn't too bad.
Are those signs, I don't mean to be funny, serious? Like laser, danger laser? The signs?
Oh, these are just kind of.
Okay, so like the match signs or something?
Yeah. There's a lot of tongue-in-cheek stuff that goes on. Yeah, so they probably have a laser inside. Yeah. So there's our work transportation. We spent most of the time dealing with dead snowmobiles. If you're a snowmobile aficionado, you'll notice that this is at least 25 years old. So yeah, this is like day 3. The snowmobile broke down in the clean air sector. So there we are. Yeah, you're always fixing something. Jack and I are working on the fryer later in the kitchen. Our job, the building is owned by the National Science Foundation, and Leidos is responsible for the building, so we have a huge preventative maintenance program. And you essentially spend the summer getting the station ready for the winter and doing the preventative maintenance, and then reacting to emergency calls, no heat, the cook calls. I have 6 turkeys to cook, the oven isn't working, Chris, can you come fix it? So all that kind of stuff. Really, really fun. You're never bored there. One of our jobs is to go into the ice tunnels. These are, I don't know, 300-400 feet below the surface that are, damn, I was supposed to turn that off. I'm sorry. I'm the rude one. The ice tunnels go quite a ways out underneath the glacier at the pole, and they access the water source for the pole and this waste disposal system. The top pipe is drinking water, the bottom pipe is sewage. And the water supply is pretty cool. They melt a huge bulb underneath the glacier, and it takes 4 or 5 years to make this huge bubble of water. And they pump the water out of this bulb and into the station and treat it because it's totally devoid of minerals. And they make it palatable, and that's our water supply. And when these bulbs go bad, they're called Rodwells. The Krell engineer, Major Rodwell, came up with this idea. And when the Rodwells become non-productive in that they start freezing again because they can't put enough hot water back into them, they abandon them and make a new rod well, and the old rod well becomes waste disposal.
Waste.
So that is the only thing that is left at the pole. Everything else is flown out. So there's the temperature down in the ice tunnels. I love this, -40, where Celsius and Fahrenheit are the same. We are down to -58 in the tunnels. I could do the tunnel walk in 17 and a half minutes. It was cold. The South Pole operates on AN8 jet fuel, and the fuel is brought in from the coast on the overland traverse. And these bladders are filled with AN8 fuel, and here are the details. The overland traverse comes from McMurdo Station, and it takes 30 days to get to the pole. The old way of bringing in the fuel was via airplane, and the overland traverse saves 30 annual aircraft trips a year, $2 million in savings, and this whole thing was cooked up by the engineers in Hanover. Very, very cool stuff. Yeah. So there's not a whole lot of green about the South Pole. They burn a lot of fuel. I mean, you got to keep everybody warm. It generates electricity. It runs the equipment. It's the lifeline. They have 2 years worth of fuel hanging around in the pole. And here's where we fuel our vehicles. So don't whine about the cost of gas at our stations. This is 3 years ago, $26 a gallon is what they figure it costs for this fuel. Yeah. And this is where all the fuel is stored in these underground steel arches. 2 years worth of fuel. One of the UTs would walk the arches every day, checking for leaks and all of that stuff. And as I said, the station runs on fuel. These are the diesel generators. There are 3 primary generators. I can't tell you how many kilowatts they are. I don't remember, but the interesting thing is they are derated in horsepower because they operate at 9,000 feet, and there's not enough air for them to work at full production. And the interesting fact is these gray devices are heat exchangers, and they extract the waste heat from the exhaust and the coolant, and they extract 60% of the waste heat, and that's what operates the whole station. All of the heat from the station is waste heat from the generators.
Holy cow.
Yeah, holy cow is right. And the station is at 70 degrees all the time.
Did they bring in diesel as well as AN8?
AN8 is the only fuel. It's a highly refined diesel fuel where they've removed all the wax.
Yep.
The gel point of AN8 is -80.
Wow.
So that's why they can run the planes on it and all of that. Yeah. One fuel. They have a few gasoline for the snowmobiles and all of that. But yeah, very noisy location, but amazing engineering.
Do they ever use dogs?
Dogs are not allowed per the Antarctic Treaty. They feel that they would be introducing foreign matter. Yeah, dogs have been eliminated from the programs. And a lot of the fuel is put into these large Caterpillar dozers. Heavy equipment operators they run 2 shifts, morning and night, and they do nothing but move snow.
Wow.
It is so much snow there. Yeah, you can see some of the drifts in the background. Yeah.
What's the average wind speed?
The South Pole is very quiet. The average wind speed, I would say, is probably somewhere in the 10-mile-an-hour range. And that is because you're at the top of the polar plateau, and there are no mountains to compress the wind and create vortexes for high winds. I couldn't tell you what the max wind is, but the most I saw is maybe 20 miles an hour. But when it's 10 below and 20 miles an hour, you know it. The wind chill goes right down.
The drifting is because it's so dry?
It's so dry, and it just blows all the time. And it just, especially the wintertime, the average winds in the winter are much higher.
And how uncomfortable is it to be breathing that dry air? How do you?
You're always wearing 2 or 3 layers of polar fleece or something to warm the air before it hits your lungs. Wintertime it's especially bad. I can't imagine what it's like in the wintertime going outside. So we always are reminding ourselves that we're there to support science. They launched daily meteorological balloons to measure the upper atmosphere. This is a detector from one of the telescopes, the South Pole Telescope, astrophysics. I'll get into it a little bit deeper. And of course, when you're on 9,000 feet of ice, it is the glaciologists love drilling cores. This is a core from the University of New Hampshire operation. And the cool thing when you think about it is they know the rough deposition of snow, the rate of deposition, and they can correlate the depth of the core with the age of the ice, and they can melt the ice and capture the off gas and make an analysis of the atmosphere from that time period.
Wow.
So some evenings when they have some waste cores, you're having a drink with a scientist on a Sunday, and they pull out their special ice and they say, "Chris, your whiskey is in 20,000-year-old ice." Pretty darn cool. Pretty darn cool.
You know, there was an article in the Mount Washington Observatory quarterly pamphlet about ice cores and analyzing them.
Yes.
Yeah, so people are interested in more about that. It was fascinating.
Yeah, many of Mount Washington Observer has worked at the pole. My summers there, we had 2 or 3 meteorologists that cut their teeth on Mount Washington. As I said, there's a long conveyor belt of folks in the North Country that go down to work in Antarctica. So here's some of the basic science, the highlights of the science: astronomy, astrophysics, glaciology, geophysics, meteorology, upper atmospheric physics, and biomedical studies. So, and that's just scratching the surface. Every year there's all these interesting smaller projects. And here's one of the telescopes for astrophysics, the South Pole Telescope, and I believe this is is that the Keck array? Another one of their receivers for astrophysics. So it's not a telescope in the sense that we think of them as optical telescopes. These are picking up long ago events in the way far away. So this is why the scientists love it down there. The air is dry, very little wind, as dry as can be, dark for 6 months, and then of course you're rotating around the South Pole, the axis. You are always looking at the same piece of the sky. Very cool. And this happens to be a picture in the wintertime. And boy, it would be pretty cool to be down there in the winter.
Are those radio telescopes?
Yes, radio telescopes, that's the correct term. Thank you. And there's another view of the South Pole telescopes. The University of Chicago is the prime mover behind it. Then NOAA is there. They've been there since, they've been taking atmospheric records since '56, long-term record. And this is an amazing chart. So NOAA gets established at the pole in the middle '70s. And this is a chart of the carbon dioxide record. And of course, this is the cleanest darn air on the planet. And then NOAA comes along and starts taking their records. And look at this chart of the CO2 levels, parts per million. It's just climbing and climbing and climbing. And we all know where that's coming from.
What has happened to the ozone hole?
Excuse me?
What has happened to the ozone hole?
Bigger and bigger.
Still getting bigger.
Yeah, this is one of the places where they identified the ozone hole.
Right.
Exactly.
Matthew.
Come on in, come on in, grab a seat on the floor. My grandkids just arrived.
That's cute.
This is one of the bigger projects at the pole, the Ice Cube Neutrino Observatory. The primary investigator is the University of Wisconsin, but there are many other agencies funding the operation. And there's a series of detectors. This is one of them that are lowered into the ice. They have over 5,000 of them detecting neutrinos. Does anybody know what a neutrino is?
We're being
Well,
bombarded by them, right?
Yeah, more or less. They are events that happened millions of years ago in the outer space, if you will. Cataclysmic event. This is my analysis of it. And they're very hard to detect. They're subatomic particles, gamma ray bursts. And the best place to detect them is when they pass through ice. So they have these large these detectors that pick up the neutrino, and it's how they've identified black holes and all of that stuff. I just kept their heat going in their place. I hardly understood it, but this gives you an idea. The Ice Cube lab is on the surface, and they have these detectors, 320 optical sensors that are, and these are different reiterations of the same project. And these detectors are, 1,500 meters under the ice, and they collect these, they detect the neutrinos and analyze them. Bedrock at the South Pole being 9,000 feet down. So each one of these holes had to be melted into the ice, and these detectors lowered into the holes. When you get home, plug in Wikipedia and do neutrinos. It's pretty cool stuff. So, a little bit about life at the pole. You work 6 days a week, 9.5 hours a day. Sundays I would go skiing. That's a heck of a ski lodge. There is some old beat-up ski equipment you could borrow. I found waxing for -10 kind of difficult. And the ice is so dry, it was very hard to get grip. But it was really cool because I could ski around the world. You could ski around the pole in no time at all. So, and New Year's Day, they always had a ski around the world race. I would do that, and they also had a marathon, the South Pole Marathon, 26 miles.
That's cool.
And then the facilities had a gymnasium, basketball, unicycles, concerts, anything you wanted to do. I mean, it was just a wonderful facility. Exercise room, that's really important for morale. Sunday afternoons, I would get on the treadmill and put my book on tapes and crank out an hour worth of treading to keep yourself in shape. Music room, a lot of musicians down there, some great talent, a lot of fun. The library, wonderful library. They have a special area of Antarctic literature they keep under lock and key that you can borrow. Also known as a quiet drinking room. And the pole has tourists. This was a gang that came in on the overland highway that the Traverse comes in with their fuel and packs it. And a tourist group decided to come. These are from, I believe that's the Iceland flag. A gang from Iceland drove their specially equipped vehicles. This one was pretty cool. It was a standard Hyundai with just big tires, and it was driven by Ernest Shackleton's great-grandson. That was really cool having coffee with him. And other tourists rolled through. Buzz Aldrin showed up, and noted as the oldest person to come to the pole. Buzz had a heck of a time. About 10 minutes after this, I took this picture of him. He came down with altitude sickness, AMS, acute mountain sickness, and he came in as a tourist on a private operation. And the U.S. policy is not to support tourists. You're on your own. But the Antarctic program decided that it would really get bad press if Buzz died at the pole. So they actually got a special plane and flew him to Christchurch and put him back together. But he commented that other than being on the moon, being in Antarctica was pretty damn close to being on the moon. Very, very cool getting to talk to him. And then Anthony Bourdain showed up. Go back and look at his. You can look up his film on being at the pole. I had no idea who he was. I don't watch TV. And I asked somebody, "Who's that big tall guy?" And he was here with one of the Antarctic program has a teacher on ice program, and this was a lady from Ohio that was there representing students and doing bringing Antarctic science back to the U.S. Pretty cool. And this is inside our galley. This is where we have all of our meals. Again, they call it the galley, a leftover from the Navy days. And some of the more important people on the station, the cooks. It's all about, food is all about happiness. Great pleasure working with his gang. Lisa is a professional at the pole. She's worked at all the stations, and she is down there this winter. I believe this is her 7th or 8th year. You know, wonderful lady. And when they ask you to fix something for you, you know. I don't get this good of food at home. This is actually a Christmas dinner. They have a huge amount of food storage. They probably have 10 years worth of food down there. Needless to say, it's well frozen. So we're getting to the end here, and I talked about the pole moving. The South Pole Station is on a glacier that's a mile thick, and the glacier is always moving toward the sea. So every year the surveyors get out their gear and they determine where the new physical pole is, and it moves about 33 feet a year. So New Year's Day they have a big ceremony and they move the pole marker to its new location. And they every year the winter overs make a pole emblem, and they install the new pole marker in the new location. So middle of February, it's time to turn the station over to the winter crew. And my first year, 3 of us had the whole plane to ourselves. Being the new guy, I got shipped home first. I lost a week's worth of pay. But, and I got to ride with the 2 chaplains from the Air Force. So I was in pretty good hands. Yeah, very cool, very cool. So, there we are. Yeah, thanks very much. I had a lot of fun doing this. Any other questions? Gary Larson's cartoon is not correct. You don't fall off the bottom of the earth. Yeah, Sarah.
Chris, when was the Antarctica Treaty implemented and which country initiated it?
It was implemented in 1959, and I couldn't give you a definitive list, but as you could guess, it's the big players. Then it was USSR, the Soviet Union, France, Italy, Germany. And then as time went on, the number of people, more countries signed on to it. And it's essentially countries that have operations on the ice, and they want to have a say in the Antarctic Treaty signatories meet once a year, and they inspect each other's stations to make sure they're meeting the letter of the law in the treaty. But I'll have to get back to you on that. But it's an amazing piece of legislation to think that all of these big powerhouses can agree on how to operate Antarctica, although there are some countries that still make actual claims on Antarctica. New Zealand claims a piece of it, Argentina does, they're so close off of the Antarctic Peninsula. Australia claims a piece of it, but it's more for show than it is actual, we own this piece of Antarctica.
Chris?
Yes?
You have described that big building you built, and the bedrock is so far below, obviously they don't go down to the bedrock. How far do they have to go down to give the building enough stability so that it doesn't?
The actual foundations of the buildings generally are large built-up pads of plywood. It's not unlike road building. When they erect a building, they compact the ice and snow with machinery, and then they measure the density of the snow to make sure they have enough bearing capacity, and then the Krell people in Hanover design the foundation pads so the buildings do not sink into the ice. But the actual snow cover around, over the pads, I'd say, is no more than 20 feet deep. Yeah, so.
And just one other quick thought. You talk about you losing a week of pay. I mean, in terms of remuneration for the work, is it good or is it bad or is it how is that you look at? I don't need numbers. I'm just curious.
From folks that I talk to, that people that, for instance, work in the trades, they say the pay is okay, but you don't make a lot of money. For me, a retired guy, 3 months of work and I come home with $30,000. Well, that's a pretty good deal.
That's pretty good.
But here's the dirty little secret. The cool part is the program provides all of your transportation from the U.S. and when you complete your contract, you're given a one-way ticket back to the U.S. that you can use at any time. So you have this $30,000 in your pocket, and you happen to be sitting in New Zealand, and then you spend 2 months and you blow the $30,000 touring New Zealand, and then you come back broke and you go, geez, I guess I'll sign another contract and go back. So yeah, it's reasonable pay. Plus they cover all of your medical expenses and food and all of that. Yeah,
wow.
So pretty good deal.
Is there any way to spend money when you're down there?
You can spend it on booze and cigarettes. That's about it. And you come home with your required T-shirts and all. They have a little store there where you can. They have the South Pole Post Office, so you can send postcards home to your kids. And all that. Yeah. Pretty good. Yes.
The impression I got from your presentation, I just saw United States representation in the scientific work and the engineering and all the support. Where were the other countries? Did I just not recognize that?
Each country has their own base. Many of them are just summertime operations, summer being from November to February, and they have their own scientific work. The British Antarctic Survey has their place. The Russian presence is much less than it used to be because of they don't have the money to operate down there anymore. The Chinese are making a huge push in Antarctica. They really want to be one of the prime movers. They are soon to launch the most powerful icebreaker that has ever been built. But the U.S. has their own science operations, the United States, but there are many cooperating scientists that come in and work with the U.S. programs. But they're essentially sponsored by the National Science Foundation and funded through different universities.
Are they all clustered together in that view you showed us?
Yeah, I'll bring up the map again. But there's the neutrinos. Here we are. The most of the scientific stations are around the coast, because that's the easiest access to get onto Antarctica. The U.S. state scientific operations are just clustered around the pole primarily, but they also have remote field camps that they fly to for specific kind of operations. There's a lot of the science happens out of McMurdo Station, which is down on the coast. Remote locations, and many people have read about the West Antarctica ice sheet and the dry valleys. I could go on and on about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
In these days when we're hearing so much about melting glaciers and global warming, are there any observable things happening that relate to global warming at the South Pole?
Well, probably what a lot of you all read in the newspaper is what I also read, of large glaciers breaking off, and the British Antarctic folks had to move their station because a huge crevasse formed, and they were at risk of losing their station. And anecdotally, people at the pole who have been coming there for many, many years tell me that this is some of the warmest weather they've ever seen. You know, -2 instead of -20. Warm is relative, but most definitely it is noticeable, especially on the coast when they look at the number of days that they have ice on the water and the number of days ice free. There's more and more ice free days. Yes. Yeah.
My bedroom had a glacier right behind it. In the 15 years I was there, and we see it about 200 feet. The glacier went back from my building.
Yeah.
So, real dramatic.
Randy spent a lot of time down there, so much more knowledgeable than you. Good point. How much did it recede?
About 200 feet.
200
There
feet.
used to be a water supply, but then it got too far away and too rough to get to it.
Yeah.
So where were you when you were there?
Just south of, just south of McMurdo, there's a white thing sticking out on the coast there.
Yeah.
There's an iceberg there, just slightly to the north of that. Place called Marble Point.
Where's it,
Dry
Randy?
Valleys.
A little bit down to the right.
Yeah, right here. This is the ice tongue. The glacier, there's a big iceberg here that hit this and knocked the top of it off once. That's why it's kind of rugged. But I was right around here in the dry valleys.
When are you both going back?
Well, I was planning to go back for another summer, and this thing called COVID rolled down, and one of the primary efforts was to keep COVID out of Antarctica. COVID did get there. I believe it was on the Antarctic Peninsula. There's a Chilean base, and a bunch of the Chilean soldiers arrived with COVID. That's as far as it got. When you're hired to go to Antarctica, you go through an intense physical exam, and the people that are smarter than me decided that anybody older than 65 years old, no hire. So they felt it was too much of a risk that you might contract COVID, and the cost to medevac you out of the South Pole is quite expensive, and it's quite embarrassing when you have employees die on the job, so they avoid that. So I don't know about Randy, whether
Yeah,
you.
same thing. I'm older than 65, so
Yeah, so
legal either.
I understand they may have dropped that cap, but I would have a hard time doing politics at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get a waiver, but I'm not sure we want to.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in going back if it weren't for COVID?
Oh,
Or is that-
if I was a young guy, I probably would keep returning, but probably not. No, I've really enjoyed it, and putting the slideshow together really reminded me how much I enjoyed it, seeing all of my friends.
Go back to the cushy life at South Pole Station.
Yeah. Randy was down there my last summer, and 5 a.m. he and I were having coffee together every morning, and it was just amazing. You'd wake up, and you'd look out the window of the galley, and you would look in the direction in which Scott and Amundsen came in from the coast in 1911, and you're sitting there in 70 degrees and your search is drinking coffee, and you go, there's something wrong with this picture. Yeah, pretty amazing place.
Chris, were the stars amazing to look at down there?
Well, I didn't get to see the stars because it's 24-hour sunlight. Every summer, the winter station manager would ask me, he said, Chris, would you like to winter over? And I would count to 5 and say no. If I was a young guy like Randy or John, I would probably do it. That's when you see the wonderful, the Aurora Borealis, or there's another name for it down there. What is it? Australia Borealis?
Yeah, and the moon was pretty amazing too.
Yeah, Randy's wintered over a couple of times. It's a great opportunity. I was retired for a few years, hanging around the North Country, and I saw Randy at the gas station, and he asked me one day, he said, so Hawk, when are you going to the ice? And damn, 3 weeks later I was hired. And that was it, and then I had to check with my girlfriend if it was okay. So that was the hard part. Great opportunity. You can go as a tourist, but to the logistics, there are a couple of companies that will bring you to the pole, but you have to write somewhere around a $75,000 check if you want to go. And so that was out of the option for me, so I said I might as well work there and have a good time. So yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. Good.
Chris?
Oh, sure.
First, your slideshow is phenomenal.
Yes.
Thank you.
So you made that?
Yes.
Wow.
I have to say, something like this slide I borrowed from the National Science Foundation. But most of it's wonderful when you're there, there's a full computer system, and there's a drive that everybody puts their photographs on. So you can borrow people's photographs and you post your photographs. So I'd say 70% of the pictures I took.
Yeah, really nice. So what were your qualifications that you got hired within a few days or weeks or whatever?
Well, I don't know how I convinced them to do it. I'm still baffled because I really didn't know that much.
You were building roads, right?
Excuse me?
You were building roads.
I was a road builder, but there's not a lot of roads down here. I had a bit of a background in building maintenance in construction and working for the Appalachian Mountain Club, remote locations, and there a fellow, Jack Corbin. Did I get the name right?
Yep.
Jack is an old AMC guy, and Jack now works in Denver for the Antarctic support contract. And I just sent my resume to Jack, and Jack sent it to the maintenance supervisor, and the maintenance supervisor asked if I knew how to fix oil burners, and I said yes. He goes, good, you're hired. So if you have a mechanical ability, so I was hired. The job opportunities down there abound. IT, medical, plumber, electrician, cook, anything that you have in the United States that it takes to run a community, there's a job opportunity down there. Mechanic, librarian, postmaster,
nurse,
doctor. Yeah. It's pretty. It's a self-sustaining community. Everybody is part, and you always had to remind yourself that you were there to support science, and that's what it was all about. So your radio would go off at 2 in the morning. Chris, it's down to 50 degrees in the telescope. Can you come take a look? So you put on your gear and you trundle out, and you realize that one of the scientists had hit the off switch for the boiler. So you flip it back on and you go back to bed. So, a lot of fun. Yeah. Great. Well, thank you very much.
Chris, word on the street is that you and your family love maple syrup. And so we wanted to give you a little bit of local maple syrup as a token of our thanks. It was a really